will set up mass deportation camps and start raiding Latino neighborhoods, and no one will stand up to them. I'm not certain that that's a safe assumption. Okay. I don't know how people will respond to what he wants to do, but I think the assumption that everyone will just accept it is a leap.
Can I just start by asking you, Rachel, first question, who's going to win next week?
Yeah, so, this is a 50-50 race. It's a toss-up scenario. I call it a toss-up advantage Harris. The polls have been flooded with a lot of internals. So, the models are 50-50, maybe advantage Trump. But when you look at all the other hard data factors and the realities of these two campaigns, which we can get into, it's an advantage for Harris. But it's very narrow, so it could go either way.
Do you think when you say it could go either way, do you think there's a risk that we see the result contested, whatever happens, especially if Trump loses next week? And do you think there'll be another January the 6th possibly?
Oh, absolutely. I think, here's January 6th was conditioned on him being in power, right? There's nothing more dangerous than a person who holds all of the reins of federal power who decides they don't want to leave office, compared to somebody who's coming from the outside, even as an old incumbent, does not have the ability to rage the same kinds of chaos. But, what I've told people for months in the United States here, we're going to get one of two things, and neither of them are great. One of them is worse, in my opinion, and that's a Trump victory, because we're going to see the collapse of American democracy and the introduction of a fascist regime or an autocratic regime that's similar to Orban's in Poland. Or Trump loses, and what we're going to see can range for anything from some isolated political violence, and I think it's very unlikely to avoid any bad reaction. I'll tell you the reason is that Republicans and Donald Trump have been laying the groundwork for the big lie 2.0 for months. And what that groundwork is, in case your international audience is not aware, is that for months, including Elon Musk, who reaches every time he tweets 200 million people, which is an amazing reach, okay, is that we let in a whole bunch of illegal migrants come into the country. And now in their mind, and now we're registering them to vote, even though they can't vote, right? They're registering to vote, and if Trump loses, the only way it could happen is because all these illegal migrants that we imported and registered to vote for Harris. I know that sounds insane, but that is a gospel fact amongst many Republicans, and the reaction could be anything from, political violence isolated here and there. If the whole Republican Party coalesces around his big lie 2.0, the way they did the first big lie, it could spark anything up to civil war, because, Republican governors, if they play that game and they say, oh, look, we're not going to certify the election because illegals voted in Wisconsin, it can get really messy really quick here.
Do you think we'll see things like lynchings?
I'm sorry?
Effectively? Do you think we'll see things like lynchings effectively if we see, we'll see people of color being, beaten in the street, from what you're saying? That seems to be the implication, right? From what you're saying. I'm not saying I agree with you, but that seems to be the implication.
Here's the thing, okay? I've been studying the rise of the Third Reich for 4 years intensively, so that when I call somebody a budging fascist, I really mean it, okay? It's well researched, right? And the other thing,
just expand on that point. You've done the research. That's a big accusation. You say you've done the research. What is, in your view, the main similarities between Hitler's Third Reich and Trump's vision for America?
First off, it's obviously centered around a charismatic leader. You have to have a cult-like leader for something like that to manifest, and we have, of course, produced one, right? But the other thing, American fascism has always been here. See, we didn't know that because they never taught us in school. We learned about the threat of communism and stamped out. Communism's so dead in America. There are 9,000 people who are registered in the Communist Party in America. That's it. 9,000, dude. Okay. It's dead. But in that conversation, we never talked about, when Hitler rose to power, there were fascist movements in France, in the UK, everywhere, right? And there was one in America that was very vibrant, had millions of people lining up with it. But then Pearl Harbor happened. And once Pearl Harbor happened and Germany declared war on us, boom, the sentiment flipped and it buried it, right? It basically neutered that movement at birth and it just went away, right? But it's not, we speak of it because of what happened to the Jews, and what happened to the Jews is so incredibly horrible. 6 million of them led to systemic slaughter. We tend to think about World War II and the Holocaust, right? But we don't think about all of the things that put Hitler, I mean, that's the conclusion of his regime. Most of the death camp murders are in 1943, okay? So that's not, he comes into office in 1930. So like, or
So
1932.
you think
So
America's
that's
on
a
the verge
long
of
time
1930s America?
of
Of
power, right?
1937.
And when we think about American fascism, it's very distinct, okay? Italian fascism was different than German fascism. Japanese fascism was different than either of those two. So it makes sense that American fascism isn't going to be about necessarily hating Jews, okay? It really is about hating non-whites in America. And that, is Black people, obviously, but more so the immigration laws that changed in the 60s that diversified America in terms of Latino and Asian and South American and American African populations, right? And so when we talk about American fascism, it's nationalism, which is similar, of course, to German fascism. You've got the charismatic leader. American fascism is centered around male supremacy. So was Nazi fascism, though it never gets talked about. Here we have a very different element because it was, they kind of brought religious people with the movement for a while, but it wasn't built, Nazis weren't built around like a religious, right? American fascism has a religious element under a Christian nationalist, right? And isolationism, I mean, that's back, right? Protectionism, and then right-wing populism, which is very distinct from left-wing populism, though both of them are populist movements, which are by their nature not necessarily, very, always very, very good for a country. So we really do have a moment in the United States. We have a man who didn't want to leave power. He had an insurrection. Okay? And not just did it couldn't, end in this insurrection in the Capitol, though. That was the last part of a multi-part plan that involved many political leaders from the Republican Party, from state level governors to, election workers to Trump to Congress, all the way through. And, when people say, do I really think that Donald Trump won't give up power or collapse democracy? It's astounding to me, how hard it is to break our optimism bias. And that's exactly what I learned in my 4 years of research into the Third Reich, that we are wired to disbelieve that something terrible like that can happen.
And just, you say it, I mean, it's a big claim. Just explain why you think it's going to happen with Trump, please. I mean, for you to say, I mean, how's he, okay, let's start, 2 parts to this question. How's he going to do it, and why do you think it's going to happen? Why do you think there's that optimism bias, as you call it, that actually this is going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, number one, I mean, think of where we are, right? We're frogs in a pot of water that's been, it's boiling. It's gotten hot. Think of how many red lines and things that we've passed that people would have said would never happen. I mean, you would never say an American president could try to extort a foreign leader for a political favor and survive, right? And that's way back at the beginning of the pile of Trump scandals and crimes. I mean, the man is facing, he's got 34 felony indictments, and you can argue, fine, those don't really matter. He's just paying off a porn star to win an election. But the other ones are for a coup plot that ranged the entire United States and had many different elements, federal government, and an insurrection, and for stealing our state secrets. And then when the FBI is like, hey, dude, we'll give you a do-over, just give them back. What did he do? He hid them from the FBI, okay? This is not a man that respects the rule of law in any capacity at all, and has a roadmap to autocracy. They have a data bank that they've collected. The last count, it had 20,000 applicants. What they've been trying to do is fill in a data bank of people so that when he takes office and they purge the civil service, once you remove the reason, and people say, well, why didn't he do it the first time? Because he ran in to government employees. There's, in our system, we have a bunch of bureaucrats, and those bureaucrats, as Trump calls them, unelected bureaucrats, they're unelected for a reason, because their job is to be trained specifically on environmental policy or IRS or whatever the hell it is, right? And administer that. And in fact, the civil service is so divorced from politics that when you become a civil servant, you have to agree not to do anything in politics other than vote and keep your vote secret, right? So that infrastructure, when he tried to seize and stay in power in December of 2020, he ran into that infrastructure, okay? That infrastructure this time, they have Project 2025, and they're going to replace that infrastructure right out the gate.
So you don't think, and this is a claim that's been made by many, on the left and Democrats, is that, he wants to replace the system, the establishment in the US precisely because, and bring in his own people precisely because he doesn't want to hit the buffers like he did during his first term in office. He wants a clean run at it.
He was constantly reined in. He was reined in by John Kelly. He was reined in by Mark Milley. He was reined in by Mike Esper. I mean, he wanted to go out there and shoot the protesters, and Esper's like, yeah, no, we can't do that, okay? What Trump wants to get rid of this time is the, yeah, no, we can't do that people, guys. So, buyer beware. You hire Trump this time, you're not going to get to fire him. You won't believe me. That's fine. That's what history tells us. People won't. I mean, hell, I've read diaries from people in the Warsaw Ghetto. These are Jews, okay? These are people who had their businesses stolen from the Nazis, what they call Aryanization. They got their business stolen and given to a Gentile. Then they had their houses, because many of the Jews were in the nicer parts of town, had their house stolen from them, all their possessions, just what they could carry, and put into a ghetto. Then, once they're all in the Warsaw Ghetto, okay, the Nazis are like, you guys are all a disease risk, and you have to build a wall around the ghetto to make sure that your diseased population can't get out to the rest of the city. And they made the Jews pay and build their own wall to seal themselves into the Warsaw Ghetto. Once they're in the ghetto, dude, they're walking every day to work or whatever across dying children, dying people, because there's no food in the ghetto, okay? And I can pull diaries and read them from somebody who's lived that experience. And
you think this is going to happen in America?
And when
you think this is going to happen in America?
I'm hearing that being deported east means being murdered by the Nazis, but there's just no way the Nazis would do that. And these are people that have already been dispossessed and ghettoized, okay? So your disbelief that fundamental chaos and change can come to the United States, that is baked in, right? That is something I understood was going to be a major hurdle to stopping Trump years and years and years ago, okay? Now, what will happen? I don't know, because right now their plan is, and they're on record, the revolution will be bloodless as long as the left allows it to be. That's a direct quote from one of these Heritage Foundation Project 2025 guys, okay? Because they all do alt media, and they tell the truth on that alt media. So you can watch it yourself if you don't believe me. What they are assuming is they will do all this stuff. They will set up mass deportation camps and start raiding Latino neighborhoods, and no one will stand up to them. I'm not certain that that's a safe assumption, okay? I don't know how people will respond to what he wants to do, but I think the assumption that everyone will just accept it is a leap, because that's not how people generally react to that kind of stuff.
Do you think he'll call in the military on the American people?
He said he would, so yes. He said he would. He said, I will, the crazy left, I don't even know what the direct quote is. It's right here on my phone.
Yeah.
The crazy leftist, when people freak out, which they're going to do if he does crazy shit, okay? His goal is to suspend the Constitution and invoke the Insurrection Act and sic military to control the people. So how are people going to respond when that happens? I have no idea.
So this is the bit that I don't get, right? If this is going to happen, why is this such a close vote? Why is the Democrat campaign struggling to win?
Yeah.
if this is the narrative that Trump is going to, take America back to a system, a fascist system that was akin to the Nazi Germany in the 1930s, surely you would think that the Democrats in an advanced economy in 2024 could put up an offering to the American people which they would not refuse.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know anything about American politics, and certainly coming from the UK, right? You're used to a citizenry that's relatively well informed and engaged. Last night I did a show in the UK, and the announcer mentioned in his introduction, he said, the election's coming up in America. There's 250 million or 200 million American adults will vote. And I was like, whoa, buddy. There's 200 million American adults. Yes, you're right about that. But about 120 million of them will vote, okay? So to answer your question, most people in America, most people in their kitchens right now in America have no idea that Donald Trump has these plans and intends to do this stuff, okay? This assumption that people are like, oh, we just don't care. No, it's totally wrong, okay? Our electorate, our civic culture is so anemic in this country. Most people do not know who the Speaker of the House is. They would know your PM if they were.
This isn't isolated. This isn't something necessarily as isolated to America. You could say the same about British politics.
Yeah, you could.
Part
And you know
of the
what? They
electorate
voted
here
in
Britain.
Brexit, right? I mean, Brexit is a classic example of the limitations of trying to warn complex negative externalities to a population when at the same time you have a propaganda campaign that's simplifying everything, right? So, what did Boris Johnson promise you guys about Brexit, right? None of it was true. None of it was a disaster. Your entire economy is a show compared to ours, especially, right? And why is it a show? Because of Brexit. And Brexit was a flaming turd, right? For someone like me, I could see your flaming turd coming to destroy your economy, guys, okay? But in that political environment where not everyone has 118 IQ and loves politics, propaganda is effective. So what was Brexit about? The brown people are taking over the UK and we're going to stop them via Brexit. That was the message that sold Brexit, okay? And now what is Brexit doing? It is entire economy, right? So that's an exact
but what is also true about Brexit is it's that kind of messaging that those who were the proponents of Brexit used so effectively to say the establishment, the government, the civil service, they think you're dumb.
That's right.
They think you're stupid. They don't think you know what you're talking about. They don't think you know how to vote. They don't treat you with respect. Why don't you actually pick a leader that actually respects you and will stand up for you?
And
That's what
Trump.
That's what Brexit did. That's what the Brexit campaign did so successfully. And the campaign to remain in the European Union ultimately failed because they couldn't combat that narrative. Because every time they kept on saying, hang on, listen to the experts, they know what they're talking about, little guy. And this was the narrative from the Brexit campaign. They got shut down because actually their moves were being used against them. Their narrative was being used against them. Do you think the same thing is happening
the same.
in
And
this
so
election
here's the
by
thing.
Trump?
You say Brexit couldn't have been stopped. And I'm like, nope. Okay, I was a nobody back then because it was like 2017, right? But if I existed and you hired me, say they called me and said, hey, we need you to help us fight this Brexit campaign, I would have done what they did on the reverse, okay? It wouldn't have been about, oh, listen to the experts and look at these data and figures. It would have been a fear campaign. If you pass this piece of legislation, you're going to lose your house, you're going to lose your job, you're going to lose your savings, okay? See the difference? And so,
And that's why Harris, and you're a political strategist as well as somebody who reads the tea leaves. That's why you think that ultimately you have to run a fear campaign about Donald Trump and the fact that you think he's going to turn, bring about a fascist state in America.
Exactly. You cannot meet a Brexit style propaganda effort that's tapping into anti-immigrant fervor and anti-establishment, as you did such a great job summing up that strategy. It was one of the best summaries I've ever heard of it, because it wasn't because you got that part where they discounted all the expertise first, and then also had this strong man who's going to fix every problem you have, right? In Boris Johnson. So it's very similar. And what my argument is, what my book is about, what my work with Democrats is about, is getting them to understand you don't beat Brexit with what the anti-Brexit people did, a fact-based argument based on brain. You beat it on gut-based, heart-based fear about change, about this change that's going to come.
Rachel, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.